Hi, I'm George, the Amateur Logician. I want to show you my brand new website. That's amateurlogician.com, and this is just the current manifestation of it. Who knows what it will look like in the future? It's definitely a work in progress, but there's actually a lot of resources there right now, and I want to give you a tour of it. And I hope you enjoy it and find my website of use. And I also would love to connect to various people who are interested in these topics as well. So I start here at the home page. And there's actually a quote from the great economist and logician William Stanley Jevons. Quote, "Logic is not only an exact science, but is the most simple and elementary of all sciences. It ought therefore undoubtedly to find some place in every course of education. The relations of propositions and the forms of argument present as precise a subject of instruction and as vigorous an exercise of thought as the properties of geometrical figures or the rules of algebra." End quote. And it's really a tragedy that our public education today does not have a requirement to take logic. That makes no sense. And hey, here's my website to try to remedy that situation to some tiny degree, perhaps. And the major content on the website is called the Trivium Logic. So this is a verbal Aristotelian scholastic style logic. It's a very powerful type of logic to learn. And I have an extensive tutorial, which I'll show you in a minute. But let's just explore the homepage a little bit. So I just give some reasons why you should learn logic. So logic is a way to discipline our thinking. Logic is about good thinking. As you master logic, you will become a superior thinker, arguer, and debater. And learning logic is an act of self-defense. I also have a link to a main video on YouTube on modus ponens and modus tollens. Eventually there will be a series, an extensive series on propositional and predicate logic there. So there will be some mathematical logic, but also some verbal style logic as well. Logic fosters independent thinking, and here I give you kind of a, so to speak, preview of some of the fallacy pages. And I think in terms of the better written articles on the website, probably the fallacies are on the top of the list, in part because a friend, Keith, proofread them, so I hope they are good for everybody. So I have division and relevancy fallacies, I have an article on informal fallacies and language, and so forth. And down here I give some highlights to some of the main pages that I think are pretty interesting, that some people might enjoy. For example, an invitation to logic, conditional propositions and syllogisms, inferences and propositional logic, but also the fallacies like testimony and unsound authority, informal fallacies in language, presumption fallacies, and so forth, reductio ad absurdum arguments, dilemmas, and Mill's inductive methods. Now, if you are viewing this on like a laptop or desktop, you'll see on the left some main links. So for example, right here, this menu, About Me, you can read that if you so choose. So I just talk a little bit about myself and some of my goals for this website. I seek what is true, good, and beautiful. But I also want to engage with others. I'm just an amateur logician with so much to learn, and I hope maybe you can teach me and I can teach you some things. But I also have a blog with updates. There's not much there right now, but here's a personal journal. I explain why it's a good idea to get a personal journal, to make a personal journal, to write one. And I have a TikTok video right there, and the customary Hello World blog post. So here I give just a list of what's on the website as of November 2023. So as you can see, there's an extensive tutorial on logic. So there are right here 41 entries, and I try to write them in a clear, easy manner, but I also get into some technical areas as well. So I don't shy away from technical areas, but also some stuff in propositional logic, which is much more a work in progress, but even now it has the basics. So things like replacement rules, rules of inference, truth tables, conditional and indirect proofs, and so forth. And there's also a newsletter you can sign up to if you are so inclined, and this is one way to keep in touch with me, to stay up to date on the things I'm doing. It might take a couple of months until I actually start sending out emails, but that's definitely one way to stay in touch and join the community. Perhaps we will form a community in the future, I don't know. So the trivium logic is the main focus on the website. You can click on or tap this, you'll see the various articles, or we can just click on the trivium logic. And I give an introduction. Logic is about good thinking, about good reasoning. And then here is the outline of the various pages. So for example, laws of thought, ontology and logic, concepts, signs and names, categorical propositions, Euler's circles, Venn diagrams, the square of opposition, immediate inference, syllogisms, enthymemes, conditional propositions, dilemmas, modal propositions, induction, deduction, science and hypothesis, and so on and so forth. Then I give some references and resources, for example, to Aristotle. So Aristotle was the first systematic logician, and I briefly summarize his main work on logic. Then I give some other recommendations. For example, Sister Miriam Joseph's book, The Trivium, is outstanding. I also provide some references to what are sometimes called neo-scholastic manuals. And these books you can read free online. I particularly like George Hayward Joyce's book, Principles of Logic, for example. And then I give some other recommendations as well. As I said, the fallacy sections or entries I think are some of the best. So let's just look at one of those. For example, we can look at division and relevancy fallacies. So let's do that. So this would include the ignorato elenchi fallacy, red herring, the ad hominem, the ad populum, the ad misericordiam, the ad baculum, the straw man, and so forth. And there's actually quite a bit to learn. If you've already studied the fallacies, if you dig a little bit deeper and read some of the scholarly literature, there's so much more you can learn. You'll be surprised. I was surprised by just looking into this stuff a little bit more in depth than the average textbook. So talk about the ignorato elenchi and give an example and so forth. So one example is from politics, another example is from philosophy. And there's some technical areas I go into, for example, nominalism versus realism. But I want to show you, I think, one of the more interesting areas. So this is the ad hominem. But let me show you something else. The ad hominem is actually very interesting too. A lot of people misuse that and misunderstand what that fallacy is. But if we look at, for example, the argumentum ad baculum, the appeal to the stick, I think this is a very interesting fallacy because it raises some good issues. So physical or psychological threats should have no place in rational discourse. Efforts to get somebody to accept an argument via force, i.e. the stick, is an argumentum ad baculum. So a simple example might be, agree with me or I'll hit you on the head. Now a threat is no proof that my argument is any good, and a threat might indicate that it's a very bad argument indeed. Or something like, change your liberal thesis or I'll give you a failing grade. Or, might makes right. The war settled that political, moral, theological question. So that's another example. But here's something pretty cool. And if you read some of the more scholarly literature, you'll see there's so much more to learn. So interesting issues are raised by this fallacy. Shouldn't it be characteristic of the human being as a rational animal to persuade each other rationally? If you're convinced of X and I'm convinced of non-X, is it not better, as a general rule, to rationally argue with each other rather than to physically fight each other? And in fact, one of the most important scholars in informal logic is the late Douglas Walton, and he has a very good textbook called Informal Logic. So he writes this on page 117. In reasonable dialogue, an arguer should have the freedom to make up his own mind whether or not to accept a conclusion, based on the argument for it. The threat of force no longer leaves these options open to reason and tries to forcefully close off the possibilities of free dialogue. Force seems contrary to the aims of reason, end quote. So there's so many interesting issues we can raise with all these fallacies. So much more than you might think. If you've studied some basic logic textbooks, we'll study a little bit more. You'll find so much more content out there. So here's the straw man fallacy, and I give some examples and so forth. But here's the principle of charity, another important issue. Knowingly setting up and attacking a straw man is an act of dishonesty. Logic is a normative science, is a tool to help us obtain truth. Assessing somebody's argument should be done fairly. Honestly evaluate an argument in such a way to interpret it as generously as possible. Consider an argument in the best light possible. Only then should we consider criticizing it, if it deserves criticism. Debate can put us in flight or fight mode. This turns off our ability to be rational. Our goal shouldn't be to win debates per se, rather it should be to discover truth. Truth should be what we conform ourselves to. Good philosophy is an openness to and embrace of reality. And then I go into what's called virtue ethics. And this page was proofread by Keith, so I think it's one of the better pages. But there's so much more too, and you might enjoy it. Like I said, there's something on propositional logic, so I'll just click or tap that. So I give an introduction, and eventually I'm going to have an extensive video series on it, and then I have some pages here, so things like basic truth tables, equivalency, or replacement rules, conditional and indirect proofs, that sort of thing, and I give some references, recommendations. So we can look at, for example, let's say basic truth tables, and I try to lay out the basic step-by-step. We can take a semantic or syntactical point of view in propositional logic. We can think about the different sentential connectives in propositional logic and their respective truth tables. But then we can construct truth tables of any arbitrary proposition. I kind of walk step by step how to do that in an easy way. There's also a page on grammar, just one page though. So in the future I hope to do a little bit more than that. There's rhetoric, there's philosophy, there's something called praxeology, which is on economics. Or we might think of praxeology as the logic of human action. I have a math and physics page. This definitely needs to be developed more. So on the YouTube channel, I already have some math videos on algebra, but also something more advanced like differential equations. But I give recommendations here. So for example, here's my recommendation with geometry. I have some books when it comes to pre-calculus and so forth. And you'll see also there's a link to the YouTube, but also my TikTok channel. And the TikTok videos are different. The TikTok videos are different than the YouTube channel, by the way. So there's different content there. But also you can support me if you want to by, so to speak, buying me a cup of coffee. If you just want to send me a couple of bucks, that can help, and I would appreciate it. And of course, like I said, there is the newsletter. So this is just kind of a brief overview of my website. As I said, the main focus right now on the website, what's mostly developed, what's extensively developed, is the trivium logic. And I try to write these entries in a clear way, but also I didn't avoid technicalities as well. So, but anyways, I appreciate you watching this, and if you want to contact me. You could just say hello. I would love to meet you, so to speak, at least virtually. And I would love to interact with people who are interested in logic and philosophy and so forth. Until next time, bye for now, and be well. Thanks for watching.